BBC Radio.
6 Music. You are now entering a parallel universe.
And wipe your feet on the way in.
Mark Riley, BBC 6 Music.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Run, runner. Going faster miles an hour. Gonna drive fast and stop and shop. With the radio on. I'm in love with Massachusetts. And the neon when it's cold outside. And the highway when it's late at night. Got the radio on. I'm like a roadrunner. Alright. I'm in love with modern moonlight. 128 when it's dark outside. I'm in love with Massachusetts. I'm in love with the radio on. It helps me from being alone late at night. Helps me from being lonely late at night. I don't feel so bad now in the car. Don't feel so alone with the radio on. Like a roadrunner. That's right. Say hello to the spirit of 1956. Station in the bushes next to 57. The highway's your girlfriend as you go by quick. Suburban trees, suburban speed, and it smells like him. And I say roadrunner once, roadrunner twice. I'm in love with rock and roll, and I'll be out all night, roadrunner. That's right. Well now, run, going faster miles an hour. Gonna drive to the stop and shop with the radio on at night, and be in love with modern moonlight, be in love with modern rock and roll, modern girls and modern rock and roll. Don't feel so alone, got the radio on like a roadrunner. Okay, now you say modern lovers. I got the AM. Got the car, got the AM. Got the AM sound. Got the rock and modern neon sound. I got the car from Massachusetts. I got the power of Massachusetts when it's late at night. I got the modern sounds of modern Massachusetts. I got the world and got the turnpike. I got the power of the AM. Got the late night, lit up white, rock and roll, late night, the factories and neon signs. I got the power of the modern sound.
So I wonder if John Cale sat there like producing Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. I think it was around about 1970, and he's thinking to himself, this is just Sister Ray by the Velvet Underground. Do what should I say? Should I say? No, I best not say anything. Robbie Hughes, hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Well, you know, Richmond was a huge fan of the Velvets, wasn't he? He used to go up to them after gigs, I believe, and present them with poems that he'd written about the band, and he knew, obviously, all the songs off by heart, as we know, and the lyrics, and he used to have these little kind of meetings with them. He'd kind of, doorstep them after every show.
Yeah, he was a proper fanboy, wasn't he? But
He was.
That is Sister Ray.
It is.
Yeah, there is no question about it. It's a great tune, obviously, and it reworked, but there you go. So I'm Mark Riley in Salford, Media City, whilst over in Yorkshire somewhere, we know he won't tell us exactly where, is Rob Hughes with the Parallel Universe.
Indeed, it's a secret. We're looking at the NME here, 17th of September 1977. I'll play Roadrunner for Aidan Moffat. So Jonathan Richman's in the news here. It says a highly acclaimed Jonathan Richman and his band, The Modern Lovers, make their first ever British appearances this weekend. Very welcome they are too. They've already created a considerable impact on the charts with Roadrunner and look like having similar success with the rock and roll album. Well, not quite though, was it? Because they just... Jonathan Richman, being the kind of person that he is, decided to go all acoustic, and it was all like strings and stuff, wasn't it? People were expecting this great big loud electric record.
Yeah, the funny thing about him was, I mean, he is a little bit kind of contrary, but he also, at one point, when I saw him at the International One, I think, he insisted on not even having a PA.
Right.
Now, these days, Wild Billy Childish is thought to be awkward by some because he always wants to play everything through, like, you know, the old WEM columns, like you would see. Say you're watching the famous footage of Black Sabbath about 1970, and they've got just those two WEM columns in quite a big venue, and they weren't appropriate. And of course, things then took off the big PA speakers and all that. And Wild Billy still uses that, even when he does a session for the BBC, which is few and far between in the BBC premises anyway. But Jonathan Richman didn't even have that, as I remember. He was just playing acoustic.
Yeah, well, he remains contrary, you know, because I did a piece on him maybe a couple of years, 2-3 years ago now, and talked to a lot of his old band members and stuff, including Jerry Harrison, you know, who ended up in Talking Heads. And Richmond didn't want to talk at all. He doesn't do interviews, you know, he didn't want to talk about himself at all. But happily, you know, 6 months later, he sent in this pages and pages all about his fandom for Velvet Underground. So he'll talk about other stuff, but just not himself. That's the way it works.
Well, I've got experience of that. I've mentioned it before, won't go on. But yeah, he came on the programme with Mark Radcliffe himself, and he was just, he wasn't very nice, really, on that night. But other people, when I've said that on, I've gone, we met him and he was lovely, so we just brought the worst out in him. But anyway.
All right. Also in the news, the Tubes, the notorious US outfit known as much for their outrageous stage antics as for their rock music, look set to make their long-awaited British debut before the year's out. Meanwhile, they've apparently been including a touch of satire in their act, appearing in one sequence in the guise of punk rockers, the Horrid Pairs. We're assured, though, that they haven't abandoned the stage nudity and other effects for which they are renowned. I was wondering, we were talking about the Tubes quite recently. Was it when Wire supported them? Is that how we got onto that?
Yeah, I think it was, because I saw Colin and Malcolm not that long ago, and he was talking about being on tour with the Tubes and how they were great with them, and whether the audience particularly got it, because like you say, it was a lot of schlock horror. There was a little bit of kind of the more bizarre Frank Zappa going on in there as well. And I don't know, did Frank Zappa have some hand in getting them signed in the first place? I think.
Oh, do you know? I don't know.
I think Rick Wakeman did. Just from the back of my mind somewhere. But anyway, Wire did open for the Tubes.
It seems incredible, doesn't it? Granada TV begins screening their second series of So It Goes in October in a regular late-night spot. The 10 half-hour shows, and the first edition features Van Morrison, recorded live in London, and Buzzcocks. Granada and London Weekend will definitely transmit the shows, it says, and several other ITV regions are considering taking it. The link man again is Tony Wilson, and producer Jeff Moore promises many surprises. The first series last year marked the TV debut in this country of Graham Parker and Eddie and the Hot Rods, Tom Waits, the McGarrigles and Sex Pistols. This new series is different in that instead of studio performances, camera crews are filming bands playing in small clubs. So the Hope and Anchor in Islington, Eric's in Liverpool, and the Electric Circus in Manchester.
Invaluable, isn't it? Just to think a lot of the acts that were actually filmed on that. And I know there was a compilation TV series that was on not that long ago, which was just clipped everything from that programme. Oh, so much great stuff.
Yeah, I need to see that. So mention the Sex Pistols. They're on page 11 here. So this is when all this it essentially turned into farce here. The Sex Pistols on tour in 77. So says here, remember when the Sex Pistols had to perform for Derby Council in private before being allowed to do it in public, a condition which naturally they refused to accept? Well, apparently the Maidstone Council have turned that right on its head by insisting that a group called Dirt perform for them in private in order to prove they're not the Pistols. This is the latest and most ridiculous development in the Sex Pistols mystery tour saga. Following last week's story of disappointment for Pistols fans in Wigan, Thrills has received numerous reports of other non-appearances by the Fab Four. So this was the idea that they'd be going out under a different guise, a different name, and it was kind of a cryptic one that perhaps, if you were smart enough, you could work out it was the Pistols. That was the idea, I think.
Sex Pistols on tour secretly it stood for, didn't it? But I do remember when that was outed, then you were, as you say, just looking all the time. And so me and Craig and Steve, as I remember, we went to see a band called Slugs.
Oh.
Thinking it would be the Sex Pistols, and it wasn't. It was a band called Slugs. And if I remember rightly, it might have even been Martin Jackson from Magazine on drums. I could be wrong about all of that, but it certainly wasn't the Sex Pistols anyway.
That's really interesting, because in the next column it says Lancashire seemed particularly prone to phony Pistols rumour. NME's Paul Morley in Manchester told Thrills of several recent incidents. For example, the adverts pulling a full house at the Electric Circus when they were supported by an unknown quantity called the Slugs.
Oh.
The Nosebleeds packing the Rafters Club after a rumour had been broadcast on Piccadilly Radio. Also, like an Electric Circus gig the day after Wigan, getting the punters flocking to see two unadvertised local bands. So, obviously, it was rife, wasn't it? And this whole thing about this band called Dirt, they are... Apparently, the promoters are called Rotten Enterprises, so people are putting two and two together and obviously getting five.
Well, I wonder if there's some mischief in the making there anyway. They probably thought, how can we get a full club? I mean, why not?
Well, that's the thing. Unknown band, full club. What more do you want?
I told you about the Garner's Arms in Wythenshawe, where some of my mates fell out with the landlord. I've no names, no pat drill, but they did put an advert in the evening news that the New York Dolls were playing at this little pub, and it was just inundated with loads. We went down. Me and Steve Hanley went down there for a laugh, and that little sign on the door: the New York Dolls are not playing here tonight.
Oh, a shame.
Loads of punks outside. It was hilarious.
Fantastic. Singles. Obviously, there's all sorts going on. Yes, Foreigner, Peter Frampton, Slaughter and the Dogs, Stranglers with No More Heroes. But it's not all about kind of punk and pop and new wave, is it? There was still a bit of prog knocking about.
Yeah, and, there'll be people rolling their eyes and stuff. But I'm having... Do you like this?
I love this.
Well, here we go. Well, this is for me and you, Bob. A monster sounding record, and yeah, not one of their own tunes. We Don't Care, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Fanfare for the Common Man. They did kind of exemplify the excesses, didn't they, of prog rock? They famously had like Persian rugs and a rug roadie and 3 Arctic trucks, one with EL on the roof, E on the roof, one with L on the roof, and one with P on the roof, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, didn't they also have their own martial arts trainer or something? Or one of them did, maybe Greg Lake, I'm not sure. But yeah, they had it all, didn't they?
Yep.
So, looking at the NME, 17th September 1977, Ry Cooder, perhaps a victim of his own good-heartedness, you might think. Says here, it's ironic that a musician of Ry Cooder's integrity should have to cancel his November British tour because his band have asked for double their wages. After all, Cooder was the one who brought the Tex-Mex members of the Chicken Skin Band into the open, featuring them on his last album, Chicken Skin Music, and touring with them across the States for 4 months. When the group saw their month-long European itinerary, none of them relished the prospect and gave Cooder an ultimatum. Double wages, or it's back to Texas for good. Cooder was aghast not so much at the amount as at the principle. And it says here, the hardest hit of all is Cooder himself, who after years as a cult figure looks set to break big. The promoter suggested performing solo, but Cooder decided the audience would be cheated, seeing as the Chicken Skin were an integral part of his show. And the promoter said it's going to be a long time now before Ry Cooder performs again.
I did see him playing with Flaco Jimenez, which was great, you know. Got him over a barrel or so, they thought.
Yeah, absolutely. He was remarkable. That was a great partnership. I think that was the first album he was on, wasn't it, Jimenez, I think.
Was it, right?
Chicken Skin Music, yeah. Chris Spedding here, tired of being Mr. Big in the session world. He hits the road at the end of this month, fronting his own band for the first time. So he sounds a bit disillusioned here. He says his 2 early solo albums seemed to confuse people. And he says, then, to cap it all, when I did what I really wanted to do, motorbiking, people thought I was selling out. For a lot of people, says the NME's Monty Smith, Spedding is an ace guitarist mucking around with pop, but Spedding himself said there's no future in being an ace guitarist. He says his new single, Get Out of My Pagoda, with its economical solo, is what he really wants to be doing. He says, I've been limiting myself before, appealing to the culture vultures, although I will grant you that some people can be economical because they haven't got the technique to be otherwise, like the Sex Pistols, but I can learn things from them because they've got enough good taste to know they mustn't overstep their technique to go for maximum effect. I've arrived at the same area, but from the opposite direction, which is an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw Chris Spedding play. Well, I saw him playing with John Cale in 1975, I think. But I also saw him playing not that long ago with Roxy Music.
Right.
Yeah, he plays with Roxy Music as well, didn't he? But he was famously one of the Wombles, and the telltale sign was that trademarked black and white flying V that he had.
That's right.
I don't know which Womble he was, but he was definitely one of them.
But yeah, he couldn't miss the guitar. So on the cover, you've got Iggy Pop here, and it's 5-6 pages, I think, interviewed by Tony Parsons. So it's all happening for him. Lust for Life is just out. He's on tour. He's in Copenhagen at this point on his European tour. He's in a really kind of ebullient mood. He seems to be happy. Parsons starts with probably an obvious way. The Pistols covering No Fun by the Stooges, and he says, Iggy says, I actually love it, he says with genuine warmth. That band, the Pistols, walk tall. It's like looking at a pile of rubbish and knowing you made it rubbish, he giggles. He sips a Carlsberg and refutes my suggestion that the debt that the present generation owe is all to him. He says, they don't owe me anything. He said, I did it all for myself, which is very refreshing, I think.
It is, and also I think Iggy would admit that the MC5 were a massive influence on the Stooges. They were renowned to be like the big brothers of the Stooges, weren't they?
Yeah, of course they were.
But let's not forget, there was that when The Idiot came out, and I think we've even played it on the Musical Time Machine, but there was, I won't say who it was, but it was a BBC producer, presenter, who was interviewing Iggy Pop, and his opening gambit was, I heard your new album today, and I have to say, I think it's rubbish.
Really?
And that was the Idiot. And he'd only heard it once, and of course The Idiot was a game changer. So Iggy won, fella nil.
I shall find out who that was. All right. What he goes into is there's all sorts of stuff going on, apart from just being back. He's just talking about, he still lives in Berlin at this point, that's his base. And of course he moved there at the request of David Bowie, and they shared a place together, didn't they?
They did.
There's no mention though of Iggy raiding the fridge and taking all the stuff out of the fridge, which we know we believe happened.
Absolutely.
But they talk about working together, that relationship, the dynamic. Tony Parsons calls it, he says they're like two blood relatives who love each other a fraction more than they want to be better than each other. Iggy says, making Lust for Life, he says, Bowie's a hell of a fast guy. He says, quick, very quick thinker, very quick action, very active, very sharp. I realised I had to be quicker than him. Otherwise, whose album was it going to be? So it's obviously you get this control thing happening. Iggy reckons, it says, the best analogy is the tortoise and the hare. He says, I just saved up and saved up and saved. And during that album, the guys and Bowie would leave the studio to go to sleep. But not me. I stayed up. He
Right.
says.
The funny thing is, like, it seemed like Lou Reed resented the popularity that Bowie gifted him via Transformer, but Iggy didn't. They just had that friendly rivalry, and well, those albums, that period for Bowie was just super creative, wasn't it?
Of course it was. Also, it went deep as well. You know, that was the thing, wasn't it? It went deep because Bowie, as we know, was the only person that went to visit Iggy when he was institutionalized in Los Angeles, wasn't he? He was his only visitor.
Famously, yeah.
Crazy. Iggy says about Bowie in the studio, he says, Bowie and I have a very abrasive relationship. It's a clash. How can two friends make an album sound like that? He says, when Bowie plays guitar, he gets nuts. His fingers start cramping after a while and he's yelling, I don't know why I'm doing this for you, you jerk. So I haven't heard that before. I like it, though.
Right.
Other stuff happening this week. You've got gigs, got X-Ray Specs at Liverpool Eric's, the Crickets, including Sonny Curtis and Jerry Allison at Kilburn Gaumont, the adverts at Sneakies and Hounslow, Subway Sect, the Slits, the Killjoys, and DJ Don Letts at the Music Machine in Camden. Wow. Right. Chris Spedding, mentioned before, at West Runton Pavilion, Peter Gabriel at Glasgow Apollo, Jonathan Richman at Manchester Free Trade Hall. You didn't go, did you?
I didn't know. I can remember the poster for it, but I didn't go to it.
Screaming Lord Sutch at the Cop Dock Hotel in Ipswich. You've got Edgar Broughton at Scarborough Penthouse, Dr. Feelgood at Southend Kersal, the Trogs at the Roxy in London, Sensational Alex Harvey Band at Manchester Apollo, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers at Brighton Top Rank. Oh, fantastic. On the live front, you got Susie and the Banshees at the Nashville by Julie Burchill. So still looking for a record deal at this point. She says the Banshees play blank and hollow Lou Reed as Sally Bowles chords, around which Susie swings her siren whine. While lacking the mass appeal of Gay Advert or Ari Up of the Slits, Susie has a band who are much better conversation pieces than all those fledgling punks festering down at the Roxy and the Vortex. What she had problem with the Roxy and the Vortex?
Well, no, I wouldn't know, mate.
Nick Kent, similarly unimpressed by the Jam at the Nashville in London. On the teasers front, you got Keith Moon is totally mystified by reports that he'd visited Malibu neighbour Steve McQueen's home, got down on all fours to bark at his dog, then went into the garden to talk to the flowers before being chucked out by McQueen's 16-year-old son.
Believable.
It is very believable because they live next to each other in Malibu, and obviously not deliberately, just ended up that way, and famously really, really did not get on at all.
Yeah, wasn't that the place that he lived where they had that massive jam with Bowie and Ronnie Wood and
it was
all of that lot? Yeah,
famously.
Again, we know too much about David Bowie, don't we? Sorry to everybody else, but
country freak Elvis Costello recently placed a large order with CBS for George Jones' back catalogue. So we know, I mean, this is 77, so we know 4 years later it was almost blue, wasn't it? The country album,
right?
But you know, also in the charts, we've got Culture.
Brilliant. Okay, 2/7's Clash. Gid is next. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Teleman, to Michelle, and to Jolie, and everybody else. And we'll see you not tomorrow. Bill Nighy in for me, and then on Thursday we've got the Book Club live in session.
Prophet Marcus Garvey prophesy say St. Jacob de la Vigo and Kingston is gonna meet, and I can see with my own eyes it's only a housing scheme that divides. What a live and mama, hey, when the 2/7's clash, man. What a live and mama, hey, when the 2/7's clash. I take a ride sometimes on Penova, London, Bronx, and sometimes I ride on bus X82. So what? What a live on Bamba, eh? When the 2/7's clash, bita, bita, bita. What a live on Bamba, eh? When the 2/7's clash. What a live on Bamba, eh? 2/7 slash. Look at the cotton tree out by Ferry Police Station. See how beautiful that used to be. And it has been destroyed by lightning, earthquake and thunder. I say, what? Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash. He bita bita bita. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash. When man a go feel it. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash. Marcus Garvey was inside of Spanish Town District Prison, and when they were about to take him out, and he prophesied and say, as I pass through the gate, no other prisoner shall enter there through. And so it has been locked until now. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash, when man a go feel it. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash, he dread. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash, you don't know. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash, he bita bita bita. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash, in this time. What Ali bam bam bae. When the 2/7 slash.
Prepare to exit the parallel universe. Mark Riley, BBC 6 Music.
And shut the door on your way out.